Post-apocalyptic fiction used to be my favorite genre of fiction. But when you come face to face with what life might actually be like in those kinds of circumstances, your outlook changes. I'm sitting in the police station writing this out, partially just so that there's some kind of documentation of what had happened. What follows is an account of what occurred on August 3rd, 2025, in the town of Concrete, Washington. My name is Carly, and I used to work as a wilderness guide and tracker, and back in the day, I used to work with the police as a search and rescue volunteer. I spent a good chunk of my youth finding lost hikers and leading law enforcement to bodies, or crime scenes in the wilderness. It was actually a pretty cool job, and I miss doing work where I directly help people who were in trouble, though that's gotten pretty dangerous, I guess. I worked SAR in the Pacific Northwest of the US, and know how to survive up to months in that region without the need to resupply, which is probably why I'm still alive, frankly. I also know the trails, paths, creeks, and streams of the area I live in like the back of my hand, because I do a lot of hiking and camping out there for recreation. All of that is to say, I know my way around the woods better than most. To get to the day in question, the town of Concrete where I live, there's this tract of forest about 2 miles wide, and well, more than twice that long. My house is on one side of a 2-mile stretch, and on the other side is a strip mall with a bunch of stores in it. I spent about a month blazing a trail through it, as it were, and got to the point where I could make it from my back door to my favorite coffee shop in less than a half an hour. And I use this trail a lot, especially in recent years, because there's also a pizza joint in the strip mall, and a really good Indian restaurant a short walk from the strip mall. I pretty much start every morning with a hike through there to get a cappuccino before I start my day. Or I guess I used to. Gonna maybe have to make my own coffee from now on. Anyway, I hike this trail all the time, and I know every tree, stone, hill, bush, and even some of the animals in it. There's this particularly tenacious Clark's nutcracker who follows me part of the way, hoping to steal some of whatever food I bring back. I brought a pizza all the way through those woods once, and I was proud of myself for not having dropped any, or messed up the cheese. The nutcracker got part of one of my breadsticks that day, just for keeping me company. But shit, you know what, none of this is important. In fact, I'm rambling. I wonder if I'm in shock. I might still be in shock. Oh well, at any rate, this morning, I was taking my trail, which is just the best part of most of my days. I love the green of the trees and the cascades, and I love it even better when the sky is gray and the mist hangs low. Today was such a day, and I savored every moment of it. Every moment that I could, anyway. I was going at a rather lackadaisical pace this morning, like I said, trying to savor everything and take it all in. And I wondered if I subconsciously or maybe physically just knew what was going to happen. Like something on the inside of me felt what was coming, and wanted to drink it all in. I don't know, but I go in for that kind of thing, and I trust gut feelings, which is another reason that I'm probably still alive. I rounded this huge Douglas fir, which I've done well over 1,000 times at this point, and I heard a noise ahead of me along the trail. It sounded like a group of people moving in the opposite direction, which was unusual, because pretty much no one knew about this trail but me and a handful of friends that I'd taken along it. But something told me that whoever was ahead of me wasn't someone I knew though, and it wasn't someone who was lost either. So I kind of perked up a bit, and I paid more attention to what I was doing. I carry this old Ruger revolver with me in a chest holster a lot of the time, though I don't usually carry it with me to get coffee. But today, though, something told me to grab it, and I'm very glad that I did it. As I passed this big rock that I sometimes stop and sit at, I spotted 4 figures ahead of me on the trail. They half-jogged toward me and seemed like they were in a serious hurry. All of them looked a little out of place as well, and one of them was wearing dress shoes, slacks, and a tie. One of them, a taller white dude with dreads, looked a bit like your typical stoner, and I thought I recognized him from town, but I couldn't be sure. He was wearing clothing far more appropriate for going to the lake, or even the beach. He wore sandals as well, which is a bad idea in the woods, as it was summer and there's all kinds of critters that could bite you. The whole group just seemed unusual in positively every way. But what bothered me the most was that they were all obviously armed with various weapons of various kinds. The stoner guy was carrying a baseball bat, and another one, a woman, who was dressed like she was about to clean a hotel room, held a sharp-looking kitchen knife. None of them carried any kind of firearms that I could see, which was a relief. I would have just avoided them completely, but as I paused there and watched them stumble through the bush, I realized that they were panicking. They kept looking behind them like someone or something was chasing them, and I wondered if they might have not just run afoul of a bear. My search and rescue brain kicked in, and I decided that I needed to try and help them. Now I stepped around the Douglas fir completely, held up a hand and called out a greeting to them. The way they reacted was bizarre, to say the least, or at least it had been at that time in hindsight. They may have just been perfectly justified. But first, they all jolted at my presence, as though I jumped out deliberately to frighten them. Then they all started to shush me harshly, like with their fingers on their lips. I was a little bit stunned, because I definitely wasn't expecting such a response, and it made me wonder if they were running from the police. I suddenly regretted making myself known, and worried that they would try to rob me, or worse. But their manner didn't match their demeanor at all, and I found myself more curious than anything else. "Is something wrong?" I asked them a lot more quietly than I had called to them. "Is there a cabin out this way?" The man in the shirt and tie asked in a somewhat panicked voice. All of them kept moving towards me, which I didn't care for at all, but all of them also looked incredibly frightened. So I gave them a wide berth and edged toward the trees to the east, leaving the western half of the trail open for them. "My house is out this way," I explained, raising an eyebrow at them. "Why, do you need a phone?" I knew that a cell wouldn't work out here. The whole trail is one big dead zone, which is why, if I'm just getting coffee, I usually don't even bring mine. At my house, however, I've got a signal booster and a proper old-school landline. I reasoned that if it was an emergency and they needed to call 911, I could get them there faster. "Phones don't work," the cleaning lady blurted out with an accent that sounded Russian, but then got mousy when the fourth person, a woman who wore proper hiking boots, cargo pants, and a parka, glared at her. This lady was carrying a machete, and when she looked back at me, it was with neither fear nor hope in her eyes, but aggression. "We need a vehicle," the woman with the machete declared in sort of a threatening manner. "Is there one at your house?" The weapon she hung low in her hand, but I could see that her grip on it was firm. I glanced around at all of them, and noticed that the stoner was kind of squaring up, and the guy with the tie seemed nervous. "My Jeep is at the house, and I'd be happy to give you a lift if you need, but first I want you to tell me what's going on." I told them all as clearly and patiently as I could manage, even though I was running clear of patience. I'd frankly already had enough of this. They were clearly up to something, or already had been, and were running from whatever it was. "She doesn't know." The guy in the shirt and tie, who I realized then was a server from the Indian restaurant, said in realization. "Maybe she can help." He turned back and forth to the dreadlocks guy and the woman with the machete, but neither of them even looked at him. "She's not going to help us," the woman holding machete insisted in a low, somewhat menacing tone. "I mean, how could she? She's just a stupid old woman. She'll probably try and call the cops." She laughed then, like the notion of trusting me was somehow absurd. Now at this point, I was sure that the four of them had committed some kind of crime in town and were fleeing from it. "Well, she probably knows the way to her house," the cleaning lady suggested in a softer tone. "She's a fucking liability," the woman with the parka whispered harshly. "We need a car," the stoner guy insisted as he looked from me to Machete Girl, then back to me. "Right," the woman with the machete agreed as she cracked her neck, trying to seem intimidating. "Okay, bitch, throw us your car keys and we won't have to fuck you up." She stared right into me, and I knew from the look in her eyes that she'd kill me and leave my body out here without a second thought. Now, before I said a word in reply, I casually lifted my hand up and rested it on my revolver's handle to remind them all that I had a gun, and they did not. They were at least 15 paces from me, and while I only had 6 shots, I liked my chances. The wide-eyed look on the restaurant server's face showed me that he hadn't even seen that I had it, while the indifferent glare I got from the woman holding the machete told me that she didn't care. "How about you just keep walking? And I'll just keep walking, and we'll all have a much better day," I suggested in a friendly tone that belayed the look I was returning to the woman who'd threatened me. I was genuinely panicked at this point, because I neither wanted to be hurt or be hurt by these people, let alone have any of us die. I'd trained for and even been in a few situations like this in my career though, so I was able to put forth the visage of calm. And that's when everything just sort of happened all at once. The stoner with the bat tried to charge me, thinking that I wasn't paying attention to him, but I had my Ruger drawn and fired before he made it halfway to me. I was kind of angry with myself about it, honestly, because I told myself that I was just going to hold the gun on him. But he was big and he scared me, and I fired on instinct. I hit him in the chest and he dropped to the ground. And without missing a step, the machete-wielding woman came at me and sliced my arm open. I fell back onto my back, and she was standing over me, about to bring the blade down into my face. But I pushed through the pain in my arm, lifted my revolver, and fired twice. She flew backward, and I scrambled away, trying to keep my gun up in case the other two tried to attack. Both the cleaning lady and the server from the restaurant had seemingly backed away when their friends had come at me, and the woman started screaming. Almost immediately, the server was shushing her, and they both looked behind them in the direction they'd come from, clearly fearing that my shots had drawn unwanted attention. Without another word, both of them picked up the weapons the other two had dropped and bolted further along the trail. I struggled to my knees slowly and shakily, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I crawled over to the woman that I'd shot and I checked her pulse. She was gone, as I'd suspected. The stoner had a heartbeat, but it wasn't good. I holstered my gun and used my pocket knife to cut up his shirt, and used it to put pressure on the gunshot wound I'd just put into his chest. I know that some of you are thinking that I'm crazy, but this is the job. If I could save him, it was my obligation to try. But unfortunately for him, it was too late, and he expired only minutes after I began first aid. I tried to tell myself that even if I'd hiked the rest of the way out there, instead of trying to help myself, he'd have died anyway. But it was cold comfort. I got up to him and only then realized how badly my arm was cut as the pain shot through it. The machete's blade had cut me from the outside of my forearm, near my wrist, all the way around to the inside, just barely missing a vein. I wrapped my own t-shirt around my arm and tied it off with some paracord I'd keep wrapped around my holster harness. It wasn't ideal, but it would do until I got to town. It was only after I dealt with my own wound that I really grasped what had happened in that clearing. I just killed 2 people, and while it was more than justified, I felt like absolute garbage. I'd spent most of my adult life doing everything I could to save people's lives. Taking even 1 life, let alone 2, made me feel like a failure, and I knew in my heart that I damaged something inside of me. I turned away from the scene and continued on toward concrete. I needed to find the police, who were likely following these nut jobs, and report what had happened. I also needed to get to the fire station, which was next to the restaurant, and get some medical help. I tried not to think about what I'd done, and I found myself wholly preoccupied by what they must have done. I assumed that they killed someone, because that would be the only reason they'd have risked killing someone else. I kept thinking about the 2 who'd run away, and knew that they'd likely not had much of a hand in whatever had transpired, and were just scared. But who knows? They were also probably ransacking my house for whatever they could take, and stealing my Jeep, which needed to be reported as well. And then I remember worrying about being afraid to use the trail ever again too, because I'd have to walk past the place where it all happened. That location was probably going to be haunted now, which I also didn't want to deal with at all. Make no mistake, ghosts are real. I've seen them on calls. I just hoped that I wouldn't see Machete Girl every time I went for a coffee in the morning. Now that's a worry. I'd made it to almost 3/4 of the way to town before I really started to feel the fatigue of everything that had happened. I got oddly super pissed then, because I was having a great day before all of this bullshit. It was nice out, the leaves were green, and I was going to get a Danish with my coffee. But then all of this instantly occurred and ruined it. I think that I was in shock then too, though I guess I'm coming out of it now, as it seems kind of self-centered and childish. But that nutcracker, the one I mentioned earlier, he was even out today, and was in rare form swooping in front of me and chirping at me, but I had no pizza crust to give him. It was actually nice because it made me realize that I would take this trail again. Ghosts be damned. It was my trail after all. I'd forged that path. The Clark Nutcracker was being really insistent today, though, and soon I found out why. As I passed a familiar pine tree, I heard an odd noise coming from the trees ahead of me. It was like someone speaking, but in a language that I'd never even heard before, let alone known. When I turned to look in the direction from which it had come, I saw something move between the trees there. Something big. I moved around the trees to get a better look because I'd never seen anything quite that large in these woods, and I wondered if it was maybe a drone the police were using. I called out, making my presence known, and explained that I was injured and there'd been an incident. Almost immediately, the creature moved out from behind a tree, and when I saw it, I understood everything. I knew now what those people were running from, and it wasn't the police. I understand why they wanted my Jeep and were willing to kill for it. I comprehended their fear and why they wouldn't tell me what was happening. I wouldn't have believed them. Before me stood an 8-foot-tall creature with 3 legs, 2 in the back, 1 in the front, which seemed to pull it along. Its chest was a bulbous mass of undulating flesh, with no arms to speak of, and its entire body was a deep shade of plum purple. Its head protruded from the chest like a boil, with no neck at all, and its eyes were jet black with bright blue pupils. From atop its head sprouted a mass of prehensile antennae, similar to an ant's. They swirled and twisted in every direction, each independent of one another. The thing had a huge lamprey-like circular mouth, filled with odd, conical, translucent teeth covered in bright red blood, and each tooth stirred independently when the thing saw me. I screamed at the thing, of course, not sure if I had gone insane or the world had, though I would soon find out. I staggered backwards in more panic and fear than I ever felt in my entire life, and for a moment, I couldn't decide whether to run, hide, or just keep screaming. The creature, whatever it was, whatever they were, seemed to grow excited at my terrified shouts, and stumbled eagerly towards me, mumbling in its odd, discordant language. Sheer, pure fear tore through my whole body in that moment, and I genuinely thought that this was the end. The incident earlier, and a dozen other ones over the course of my career, seemed practically recreational compared to what I was currently experiencing. But then I realized something else about the people who'd attacked me. The woman with the machete had been eyeing my gun the whole time we spoke, and now I knew why. She wanted it. I drew out my revolver again, this time in more of a panic. I took aim, and I fired. I half expected it not to have any effect at all, but the thing was whipped backward at the force of the shot, and it screeched so loud that I had to cover my ears. When its horrible blue eyes turned back at me with angry hunger, I didn't hesitate, but aimed right for them and fired twice more. There was an audible pop as one of its huge eyes burst open, and yellow fluid poured out. The thing seized, lurched backwards, and then forward, and collapsed in front of me, and the ground shook as it fell. I began up the trail towards town, but paused when I heard the sounds of many people screaming in terror, and suddenly realized fully what was going on. I turned back, but stopped in my tracks when I saw the creature's grotesque, segmented antennae writhing in every direction, despite its apparent demise. I moved out into the trees, well away from the thing, and picked my way through the brush until I was many meters away from it, looking back the entire time. Each time I glanced, I expected, or perhaps hoped, that they would stop and lay still. But they never did. I made it all the way back to my cabin before I realized that I'd passed the bodies of the two people I'd killed without even noticing. As expected, my home was in shambles, but there wasn't much worth taking. My Jeep was gone, which I also expected, having left the keys for it on the hook inside my front door. But I didn't really know what else to do, so I just cleaned up my house. I think I was still in the throes of shock at that point, and I think I'm coming down from it now. And I kinda wish I wasn't. See, the reality of this, the reality that everyone in concrete is probably dead, is difficult to process. They left my laptop, so I'm just writing this. I wanted there to be some kind of record of how it went down, in case I don't make it. It helped with the shock. And so I don't really know what to do now, but I'm not sure I'm even going to go anywhere. I might just wait here and see what happens, because I don't know that I really have any options left. I don't know how fast these things, whatever they are, can actually get, but something tells me that I'm not going to last long traveling without a car. That's also to say nothing of running into another crew of, well, I guess they became raiders or bandits. It was all very much like one of the post-apocalyptic novels that I love to read. Man, it didn't take long for people to fall apart, become barbarians, did it? I'm honestly not sure if it's actually the end of the world or not, but it sure feels like it. I think I'll just wait here a little while and see what happens.